Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Brown.
Morning. So we still have a few minutes. People are still arriving. Things you should have with you today are the agenda for Chapter 6, Part A, and the formula sheet for Chapter 6, 7, and 8, which we will make use of.
Hello, just making me on. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕਿ ਚਾਹ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲੱਗੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਲਾਹ ਲੱਗੂਗੀ ਤੇ ਮੈਨਾਂ ਬਰਾਉਣ ਲੱਗ ਮੈਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਬੰਦ ਕਰਕੇ ਚਾਹ ਪੀ ਲਿਆ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ
Okay. It's 9 o'clock. We might as well get started. We're waiting for a few people to arrive, but they'll be able to join us when they get here. Let's take a look at the agenda. The first item on the agenda is, of course, that our third exam will be next week, week 10. We're in week 9 now, and we'll have an exam on chapter 5. And of course, the exam will cover compound interest assignments 7, 8, and 9. We'll be covering compound interest assignment number 9 today. So the exam will be exactly the same format as the previous exams. There'll be 15 questions on chapter 5 and 10 questions on compound interest assignments 7, 8, and 9. you'll still have a 24-hour window in which to write the exam. And once you start the exam, you'll have 3 hours to complete it. So hopefully you will all be ready to write that exam. You've done pretty well on the other 2 exams, so I'm optimistic that you'll do well on this one. Let's take a look at chapter 6. I call it chapter 6, although your textbook calls it chapter 5, but I'm sure you figured out by now that these 2 chapters have been reversed in order. And I divide chapter 6 into 2 parts. The first part that we'll cover today, I refer to it as units and price. And the second part that we'll cover next week, I call total sales dollars. The reason why I deal with these 2 concepts separately is the units and price part deals with a situation where we only have one product and one price. That might not be incredibly realistic for a real company, but it would fit the concept of considering whether to add a new product to an existing product line, or to say buy a specific piece of machinery that is designed to produce one product. And mathematically, when you're only dealing with one product and one price, it makes the calculations we have to do a little bit simpler and makes it easier to understand the whole concept of break-even analysis. Next week, when we do total sales dollars, the math is slightly different, and we deal with the concept of looking at a whole company. So it's a little bit more difficult. Now, strangely enough, in your textbook, they don't divide these 2. In your textbook, they cover both concepts at the same time, which I prefer to deal with them separately. So when I go through it, we'll only do the units and price concept today. Now, what we're dealing with here is called break-even analysis. And the whole point to break-even analysis is to be able to tell when your company is making a profit and when your company is making a loss. As you move through sort of your business part of your program, you'll find that any course that deals with numbers will deal with some aspect of break-even analysis. Things like accounting, marketing, economics, pretty well any time that you're worried about what the numbers tell you, one of the important details that the numbers tell you is whether you're making money or losing money. And so this concept of break-even analysis will show up in many different courses. This is just our first sort of overall look at how it works. So having said that, let's take a look at some of these questions. Hopefully you have the formula sheet dealing with chapter 6, 7, and 8. Now I have a question in the chat. Sir, till next week, which assignments do we need to complete? Okay. You'll have to complete the chapter 5 homeworks, and you'll have to complete the homework assignments for compound interest 7, 8, and 9. So let me put that in the chat box. So for next week, complete chapter 5, part A, B, and C. And complete interest 7, 8, and 9. Does that help? Those homework assignments will disappear after you write the test on this material. So let's take a look at the first question we have here. I will share my whiteboard. So a watchmaker charges $19.99 to replace the battery and clean watches. Variable costs include a $7 battery. Specialized tools had to be purchased at a cost of $346. So let's take a look at how we have to consider this information. We know what the watchmaker charges. So this is our selling price. S equals $19.99. Now they refer to something here called variable cost. And this is sort of a little bit of economic theory. What we're doing is we're considering the costs involved here as variable cost, which are costs that go up and down with the amount of output you have to produce, and fixed costs, which are things that don't vary with the amount of output you're producing. Fixed costs are things like your rent, or in this case, they bought some tools. And so these are costs which have to be paid before you actually produce anything, but they're not charged on a per unit basis. So in this case, we're being told that the variable cost, in other words, each watch needs a battery, is $7. And the fixed costs are these $346. So once he's paid the $346 for the tools, he doesn't need to buy a new set of tools for every watch. But of course, the $7 for the battery, he needs to pay that every time. And what they're getting us to calculate here is something called the contribution margin. And so the contribution margin is how much richer does he feel every time he fixes another watch. And so the contribution margin is the selling price minus the variable cost. And in this case, our selling price was $19.99. The variable cost is $7. And so I'm going to take a wild guess and say that's going to be $12.99. So every time he fixes and cleans a watch, he feels $12.99 richer. It's not quite the same as profit because he still has to cover his fixed costs out of that $12.99, but he doesn't have to cover all of the fixed costs out of this one watch. What they call the contribution rate is just taking the contribution margin and expressing it as a percentage. So the contribution rate is the contribution margin divided by the selling price. And in our case, that's $12.99 divided by $19.99, and we'll have to go times 100 to turn it into a rate. And let's see what we get. So it didn't tell us how many decimals to go to. So I'll go to 2 decimals, and I got 64.98%. Now, we haven't actually sort of found his break-even point or anything, but we've just figured out how to calculate the contribution margin. And this contribution margin is a big part of other calculations that we're going to do when we do learn to figure out the break-even point. But that's all they asked us to do in this case, just calculate the contribution margin and the contribution rate. So any questions on that before we take a look at the next one? Okay. Let's take a look at the next situation we have to deal with here. So, market research for a new product indicates that the product can be sold for $50 per unit. So they're telling us the selling price. We're going to make a note of that. S equals $50. Cost analysis provides the following information. Fixed costs per period equal 8640. So fixed costs equal 8640. So these are costs that don't go up and down with however much they produce. This could be, say, the rent on their building. It doesn't matter how many units they produce, the rent stays the same. Variable cost equals $30. This shouldn't say variable cost per period. That's very confusing. That should say variable cost per unit. In fact, I'll try and change that because that's confusing. Variable cost per unit equals $30. And they also tell us that the production capacity per period equals 900 units. So somehow they know that if they're working to capacity, the most they can do is 900 units. And they want us to come up with something they call the revenue function. And the revenue function is just the equation that would indicate how much money we're making. So total revenue equals our selling price times Q. And Q is quantity of units. So that would be our revenue function in terms of these variables, but they expect us to put a number in here because we know the number. So this would be total revenue equals 50 Q. So that would be what they're calling the revenue function. Total revenue equals 50 Q. And remember, Q is quantity of units. Let's put that up here. That's how much we're producing. So if we knew how many units we're producing, multiplied it by 50, that would give us our total revenue. And they also want us to come up with something called the cost function. So that's total cost. And total cost is where our little bit of economic theory comes in here. We have fixed costs, which don't change with the amount of output we're producing, plus variable cost, but times quantity. But again, they want us to put numbers in here, the numbers that we know from the question. So fixed costs is 8640 plus variable cost was 30 Q. So that would be our, where they say state the cost function, we'd be saying total cost equals 8640 plus 30 Q. And they want us to calculate the break-even point. So let's do this. What they mean by the break-even point is we're not making any profit. In other words, at break-even, total revenue equals total cost, and profit equals 0. So if we set total revenue equal to total cost, what we're saying is that 50 Q equals 8640 plus 30 Q. And what they're expecting us to do now is to solve this equation for this value of Q, because it's the only unknown here. So this 30 has to leap over here. 50Q minus 30Q equals 8640. And we can see here we've got 20Q equals 8640. And now we can solve for Q equals 8640 divided by 20. And a few people have given me that answer. So let's take a look at what it is. 8640 divided by 20 is indeed 432 units. And so we'd be breaking even here. We can sort of check this by putting this back into our two equations. Total revenue equals, what was it? 50 times Q, but 50 times 432. And what do we get? 2160. And another 0. And if we put it into the cost equation, we should get the same thing. Total cost equals 8640 plus 30 times 432. So what does that give us? 30 times 432 is 12960 plus 8640 gives us exactly 21600. So just like we did in chapter 4, if these two are equal, then we're happy with this. So that's what they mean by finding the break-even point. But I should point out that we don't have to do this calculation all the time. Let's take a look at what we will do most of the time that we run into the same situation. What you want to do is calculate the contribution margin, which is selling price minus variable cost, which in our case is 50 minus 30 equals 20. But notice the contribution margin is 20, but that's exactly what we did over here. We did 50 minus 30 and we came up with 20. So our break-even point in units, we can avoid all this calculation and it just becomes fixed costs divided by contribution margin, which was 86. Oh, that's not a 6. 8640 divided by 20, which would still be 432. So make a careful note that although I've gone through this whole calculation just to sort of give you a conceptual idea of what is going on there, when you're doing these calculations, just go straight to the heart of the matter. Just go to fixed cost divided by contribution margin. So almost always the first thing you ever want to do is calculate that contribution margin. So let's take a look at this break-even chart. Even though I can't get you to draw a break-even chart on Moodle, because Moodle's just not that clever, or maybe I'm just not that clever, one or the other. But let's go over and figure out what we're going to do. So the first thing you're going to do when you're trying to draw a break-even chart is you're going to find 3 points. Let me find 3 points on total revenue and total cost. And let me show you what I mean there. So I'll do total revenue here. Now it says, Mr. Brown, can you put the final answer for letter C so that when we look at the snapshots, we'll have a basis of what, yes, I can. Let's go back there for a second. calculate the break-even point. That was 432. Okay, it's a good idea to put that there. Thank you. So this is where I'm going to put total revenue, and I'm going to put, we're going to look for dollars and quantity, and we're going to do the same thing for total cost. So I draw this strange little chart. And we're going to do the same thing for total cost. We're going to look for dollars and quantity of units. And on each of these charts, we're going to look for the same 3 points. We're going to look for where quantity is 0, when quantity is at break even, and when quantity is at capacity. So we know most of these numbers. We know that if quantity is 0, when we're looking at this equation, total revenue equals 50 times Q. If Q is 0, dollars will be 0. And when we're at break even, we already found out that the break even quantity was 432, and the break even units was 21600. Now the capacity, they told us in the question that the capacity was 900. And so we don't actually know this number yet. What we have to do is put it into this equation. Total revenue equals 50 times 900 and see what that comes to. Let's take a look. 50 times 900. So that would come to 45000, 45000, and so that would go here. And so we knew all 5 of these answers already. This is the only one we had to calculate. Let's do the same thing for the total cost equation. We know the equation. Total cost equals, what does it equal again? 8 640 plus 30 times Q. And let's consider what we know. If we put a 0 in here for Q, in this case, we're still stuck with paying for our fixed costs. So even before we've produced any of these units, we still have to pay 8640. In other words, we can't start doing any work until we've paid the rent on our building. Now for the break even, we calculated previously that the break even was 432. And we also calculated that the cost meant this was 21600. So this line is exactly the same. Now the capacity, we already know that the capacity is 900 because they gave us that in the question, but we don't know this answer here. So we have to go down here and calculate it. Total cost equals 8640 plus 30 times 900 and see what that equals. So 30 times 900 plus 8640. We can see that this is 35640. And so that we have to fill in here 35640. So now what we have is we have these ordered number pairs that we're going to have to graph. So let's find ourselves another page and take a look at what the graph has to look like. It's a lot like the graphing we did in chapter 4, except here we're only worried about one quadrant. We're only worried about where things are positive. And we're going to put quantity down here and dollars up here. And what you want to do when you're deciding on the scale that you've got to deal with is take a look at the total revenue first. We know this point here is going to be 0, 0. And find out how far we have to go up. We've got to go up to a quantity of 900. So let's try to put that on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And any numbers that you actually use, make sure you put them on the graph. And don't be too concerned about how carefully or artistically your graph is drawn, because if these had to be works of art, they wouldn't let me teach this course. So take a look at how far we have to go up. We've got to go up to 4,500. So I'll basically go up by thousands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is 5 or 50,000. Sorry, I went up by 10,000. This is 50,000. So 4,500 will be somewhere like right here. And now you have to see if you can find this point. So I'm going to put it roughly here. And I've got to find 432. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. I'm going to guess 432 is somewhere like here. And I've got to find 2160. So 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. So somewhere vaguely like here. And again, it doesn't have to be a work of art. And then find that point. And then you want to put a ruler on your piece of paper and connect these 3 dots. And they should vaguely line up. So not too bad. And if they don't vaguely line up, if they begin to look like your next door neighbor's dog's hind leg, then go back and look at your math, because you might have a problem. And you've got to put a label on this. This is our total revenue. So the reason we did total revenue first is because it will go up to the highest amount. So now try the same thing with total cost. When we're at 0, our fixed cost is 8640. So this is 1,000, 500, somewhere vaguely like here. 8640. And remember, any numbers you use, put them on the graph. And then they both went through this point, so we've already got that point. And 900, we're at 35640. So 3, 4, 3, 5, somewhere vaguely like here. 35640, and try to find that point on your graph. And then put a ruler on it again and see if these things vaguely line up. Oh, for some reason my ruler's not working. So didn't quite go through where I had this point, but that's just because of my lack of artistic ability. But they're close enough for the job we're trying to do. So this is total cost. And so there's three things you want to label on here. One, you want to label this area as break even. This area here, you're making a profit. And in this area here, you'd be experiencing, oh, not a loss. And you want to connect or draw people's eye to this point here, because this is the important point of this whole thing. When you create a business plan, this diagram would be part of your business plan. And you're trying to show people that it's worth investing in your business because it's feasible that you're going to make money and be able to pay them back the money they've loaned you to start your business. So that's what whenever they refer to drawing a detailed break-even chart, that's what they're asking you to do. You probably want to draw a few of them by hand for yourself on a piece of paper, but I can't get you to draw them on Moodle. So what I can get you to do, however, is I can get you to calculate these little charts of all these points. So any questions on how that worked before we see what else they can do to ruin our day here? Okay, let's save this. And I'm recording this and I will post it on my YouTube site. So you can see that process happen again if you feel like going through that pain again. So let's take a look at the next one they've given us here. So a firm manufactures a product that sells for $12 per unit. So we're going to need that piece of information. Let's make sure we keep track of that. Selling price equals 12. Variable cost per unit is $8. and fixed cost per period is 1,200. Oops. And capacity is 1,000 units. So the first thing you're going to want to do is calculate the contribution margin. So contribution margin is selling price minus variable cost, which equals 12 minus 8. So the contribution margin is 4. And once we know the contribution margin, we can immediately calculate the break even, which is going to be the fixed cost divided by the contribution margin, which is in our case 1,200 divided by 4. And I'm going to hope that's 300. So that's the most direct way to find that break-even point. Fixed cost divided by the contribution margin. Then they say calculate the break-even point in sales dollars and cost, which is a way of checking to see if this is the right answer. So total revenue equals our selling price times our units of 300. And what do we get? 3,600. And we should get the same thing when we look at total cost. If we don't, we know we've screwed up somewhere. 1,200 plus 8 times 300 is 2,400 plus 1,200 is 3,600. So these two are equal, which means we like this one. So calculate the break-even point as a percent of capacity. So they want us to calculate percent of capacity. So our break-even point was 300. And so our capacity they gave us is 1,000. So 300 divided by 1,000 and times 100 better be 30%. So now they've switched it up a bit. Assume the quantity calculated in part A, which we know to be 300. If the manufacturer wanted to make a profit of 600 per period, what price would it charge? We lost the word charge here for some reason. Not sure why. Oh, there it is. It's hiding. It's going to continue hiding. I don't know why. Okay. We'll ignore that. And let's take a look at what we have to do. We know that at break even, we set total revenue equal to total cost because profit equals 0. But now profit does not equal 0. Profit equals 600. So we have to change our equation, what we're now dealing with is total revenue minus total cost equals 600. So if we know that they're making a profit, then we know that total revenue minus total cost equals 600. And we've been told to use the quantity calculated in part A. So our total revenue equation is 12 times 300 . Oh, okay. We're gonna find the new price instead of a price of $12. So let's back up there a bit. We're gonna have S as a variable times 300 minus our total cost is 1200 plus 8 times 300. And now this is going to be equal to 600. So now we can solve this because the only variable we're left to deal with is this S. So let's see what happened in here. 300S minus 1200, take away 8 times 300 is 2,400 equals 600. So we're trying to isolate the S. So we've still got 300S equals 600 plus the 1,200 that had to leap over plus 2,400 that had to leap over. So 300S equals some nonsense we don't know. 600 plus 1,200 plus 2,400 is 4,200. So S must equal 4,200 divided by 300, whatever that comes to. Looks like 14. So if they charge a price of 14, they should be making $600 profit. Let's see if we can make that work. We need a new page here somewhere. So what are we trying to do here? We're going to use S equals 14. So total revenue equals 14 times 300. Is our, oops, that didn't work at all. Is our 4,200, and total cost equals, what do we got here? 1,200 plus 8 times 300 came to 3,600. And so 4,200 minus 3,600 should give us our 600. So this is total revenue minus total cost equals profit. So if we go back to our original diagram here, whenever you're told that profit is not zero, you need to use this concept here. Total revenue minus total cost equals profit. If you're told you're at break even, then total revenue equals total cost. So, any questions on how that worked? Okay, I'll take that as a good sign. Either that or everybody has now gone to sleep. I wouldn't
Mr.
blame you.
Brown,
Yes,
can you put the answers on the after each item? So letter
sure.
A, B, C. Thank you.
That is actually a very good idea. So the break-even point we found was 300. The break-even point in sales dollars and cost was 3,600, and again 3,600. The break-even point as a percent of capacity was 30%, and assume the quantity calculated in part A, which was 300. If the manufacturer wanted to make a profit of 600 per period, what price would it need to charge? And that turned out to be $14 per unit. Now, someone has asked, why did we have to find the value of S equals 14? Oh, when we already have the value of S equals 12. We were given the value of S equals 12, which was, and we calculated the break-even point at $12. But they've, in part D, they've said, assume that the company wants to make a profit. Rather than making a profit of 0, they want to make a profit of 600. So we know they're producing 300 units because they said assume the quantity calculated in part A. So if they're producing 300 units, what price would they have to charge to make a profit of 600? We know if they charge 12, down here we calculated it. If they charge $12 per unit, total revenue equals total cost. But we wanted to find the price that they'd have to charge if they wanted to make a profit of 600. And so that's why we had to change the price to 14, even though we already knew that the price had been $12. Does that make sense? So let's save that. And clear all that nonsense. And clear this nonsense. And clear that nonsense. And clear that nonsense. Okay. So let's take a look at the next thing they're trying to do to us here. So doesn't leave me a lot of room to work, but the Superior Jump Drive Company sells jump drives for $10 each. So we know we have a price. S equals 10. Manufacturing cost is $2.60 per jump drive, and marketing costs are $2.40 per jump drive. So, and royalty payments are 20% of the selling price. So these things are all things that are going to change with the amount they sell. So they've made our calculation of variable cost fairly complicated. Variable cost is, to start with, it costs them $2.60 to produce them. Whatever their marketing costs are, advertising or yeah, but it works out to $2.40 per jump drive. We don't know quite what those marketing costs are. And they have to pay someone a royalty of 20%. So 0.2 times the $10. So we may as well calculate what all that nonsense works out to. So 0.2 times 10, $2 plus 240 plus 260 is $7. So their variable costs are $7 per unit. The fixed cost of preparing the jump drive is $18,000. So fixed cost equals $18,000. And capacity is 15,000 jump drives. So the first thing they want us to do is calculate the contribution margin, which is the first thing we should always do anyway. S minus VC, in our case, 10 minus 7. So their contribution margin is $3 per drive. And the contribution rate is the contribution margin divided by the selling price. So 3 over 10, and we'll go times 100 to turn it into a percentage. And it is indeed 30%. So I'll put these numbers up here before I get in trouble for not putting them. No, that's wrong already. 3. And the contribution rate is 30%. So the break-even point we know that break-even is equal to our fixed costs divided by the contribution margin. And our fixed costs were 18,000. And the contribution margin was 3. And I see we have answers for that, which is good. So looks like 6,000 units. So let's put that up here. Compute the break-even point in units. that's 6,000. And in dollars, you should always do both total revenue and total cost. Total revenue, what was our price? $10 times 6,000 is going to be 60,000. And let's find fixed costs. 18,000 plus 7 times 6,000. Let's see what that equals. So 7 times 6,000 is 42,000 plus 18,000 does indeed equal 60,000. So that's good. So in dollars, that came out to be 60,000. Try drawing a straight line. And break-even point as a percent of capacity. Was 6,000 divided by our capacity, which they've given us as 15,000 times 100. Turned out to be 40%. So we'll put that up here. They want us to draw a detailed break-even chart. So in order to do that, we would have to find these points on the line. So let's take a look at that. So start with total revenue, total cost, draw this strange little thing that looks like you belong to some weird religious cult. And we're looking for dollars and quantity, and we're looking for the same 3 points on every line. When quantity is 0, when quantity is break even, and when quantity is at capacity. And we already know most of these answers. We're dealing with an equation that says total revenue equals 10 times Q, but if Q is 0, we're making no revenue. We've already calculated the break even as 6,000 and the break even dollars as 60,000, and capacity we were given as 15,000. The only one we don't know is this one, so we have to plug it in. Total revenue equals 10 times 15,000, which is going to be 150,000. And we have to do the same thing for total cost. Total cost equals, what was our equation again? 18,000 plus 7 times Q. So if Q is 0, we still have to build the factory before we can produce any. So we still have to shell out this 18,000. We know this one because we've calculated break even of 6,000 and 60,000. And we know the capacity is 15,000. But again, this is the only one we don't know. We have to calculate it. So total cost equals 18,000 plus 7 times 15,000. And someone is giving me the answer there. Let's find out. 7 times 15,000 is 105,000 plus 18,000 is correct. 123,000. So we have all our numbers. We'd have to produce a diagram. We're still only dealing with, well, that's not going to work. Let's try straight lines. We're still only dealing with the sort of positive area quadrant here. And we're still going to put quantity down here and dollars up here. And then look first off to your total revenue to see how far it goes. We've got to go to 15,000 here. So I'll basically go in thousands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So there's our 15,000. And up here, we got to go to 150,000. So I guess I'm going by 10,000s. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 150,000. And then we have to see if we can pretend we can find that point. I'm going to put it vaguely like right here. We know the 0, 0. That one's easy. And we're at 6,000. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000. And 60,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right here. And then we have to see if we can find that point. And then get a ruler and see if those things line up at all. Not bad. So put a label on that. A line without a label is a waste of time. So you got to have a label there. And then do the same thing for total cost. We know we're at 0, but we're at 18,000. So 10,000, 20,000, 18,000 is going to be somewhere like here. We've already got this point, but we need 123. So 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12. So 123 is going to be somewhere vaguely like here. And see if you can draw that point out here. And again, get a ruler, see if they line up at all. Not bad. And believe me, they don't always line up that nicely. So total cost, and you want to draw people's attention to this point here because that's the important point on this diagram. So, oops, let's try drawing straight lines. Connect that point. Oops. So people can see what it is you're hoping they're going to see. And put a label on it. This is our break even. In this area here, we're making profit. And in this area here, we're making a loss. So that's what they want for a detailed break-even chart, which you won't have to do on Moodle. What you will have to do is produce this little chart with all these numbers as if you were going to produce a break-even chart. So then they're going to switch things up. It says determine the break-even point in units if fixed cost is increased by this much, while manufacturing cost is reduced by this much per jump drive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save all this nonsense and we'll start another page. Any questions on what we've done so far? Even though we've ignored D and E, we're going to do them separately. Are we good? Okay, let's save that. Clear all that. And now we'll get rid of all of this nonsense and just look at part D and E. So determine the break-even point in units if fixed cost is increased by 1,600. So let's digest that piece of information. Fixed costs equals, we were told they were 18,000, but now we're going to decrease them by 1,600. So 18,000 minus 1,600. So now they want us to deal with 16,400 for fixed costs, and manufacturing is reduced by 50 cents per jump drive. So variable cost, we know it equals 260, but now it's going to be 210.
Mr. Brown,
Yeah,
I have a question.
sure.
Why we need to minus 1,600?
From the fixed costs,
Yeah,
because they've told us in part D, determine the break-even point in units if fixed costs. Oh, that's a very good question. Thank you very much. Obviously, I screwed it all up. Thank
So
you
it's
for pointing that out. Increased. That's a very important word. Plus. Thank you very much for rescuing me there. 18,000 plus 1,600. Okay. Yeah. How embarrassing is that? I can't even read. So let's try that again. Now it becomes 19600. Thank you. So, and manufacturing cost is reduced by 50. So this will become 210. And in this case, it is reduced. So let's hope I got that right. 210 plus 240 plus 0.2 times 10. So let's see what this came to. 0.2 times 10 plus 2.4 plus 2.1. So these have come down to 650, which makes sense because they were $7 and they've come down by 50 cents to 650. And they want us to determine the break-even point. The first thing we're going to do is calculate the contribution margin, which is selling price minus variable cost. $10 minus 650 is $3.50. Once we know the variable cost, we can calculate break even as fixed costs over contribution margin. We have a new fixed cost, 19600 over 3.5. So let's find out what that is. 19600 divided by 3.5. I'm getting 5,600. Okay, so determine the break-even point, blah, blah, blah. The answer to that we got was 5,600. And determine the break-even point in units if the selling price is increased by 10%, while fixed cost is increased by 2,900. And these are independent questions. So we can ignore what we did here and just start again. So selling is increased by 10%. So S equals $10 plus 10% of $10, and that's probably going to be $11. And it is $11. While fixed cost is increased again, so fixed cost equals 18,000 plus 2,900. So $20900. So again, we're looking for the break-even point. So our first step is to find the contribution margin. Contribution is S minus VC. So in this case, it's 11 minus 7. We can ignore this 650 over here, and this becomes 4. And then break even equals fixed costs over contribution margin. And we get 20900 over 4. And what do we get? $5,225. So our answer here is 5,225. So any questions on how that worked?
Hi, Mr. Brown. Where did 7 came from as the variable cost?
In the original question, the variable cost, but we can put it in here. Variable cost equals, in the original, it was 260 plus 240 plus 20%, so 0.2. You're quite right. Our variable cost should have changed. Thank you. Because I took the original 7, but now if it's 2% of 11, that would come up with a different number. Thank you for pointing that out. Let's get rid of all of this nonsense and fix that. So we need to figure out what that is now. Let's find that. 0.2 times 11 is $2.20 plus 2.4 plus 2.6. Now that becomes 720. Thank you very much. So now we still need to find contribution margin, which is S minus VC, which is 11 minus 720. And break even equals our fixed cost divided by, excuse me, contribution margin. And our fixed cost is now 20900 over 7. Oh, I didn't finish this calculation. What is 11 minus 7.2 is 380. $380. And what do we get here? 20900 divided by 3.8. Now I'm getting 5,500. So let's cross out this and put 5,500. So before we move away from this, make sure I haven't screwed anything else up. How does it look? Are we good now? Okay, hopefully that's good. Thank you for pointing out that the variable cost had changed. I'm looking back in my own notes and I did it wrong in my in my own notes. So I'll have to fix that. So let's save that. Clear that. And let's take a look at the compound interest assignment we're going to do today. I'll find the Excel file dealing with it. Hopefully. And we can expand it a bit. Now, although I've found the Excel file, that doesn't mean you can see it yet. Let me. So are we all looking at an Excel file now? If anybody can't see the Excel file, let me know before I start talking about it and making no sense to you. So what we're dealing with today are called perpetuities. And perpetuities are a strange concept. What a perpetuity is a concept or a payment that lasts forever. So in most cases, when we calculate the value of n, what we're calculating is how long the payment goes on for. But with a perpetuity, the payment goes on forever. So let's say in this case, they've said, choosing to commute to work by driving a hybrid vehicle will save $32 each month in fuel. If money is worth 4% compounded monthly, how much extra money over the price of a gas-powered vehicle should be invested to purchase a hybrid? So we can see that this is a perpetuity because there's no period given for how long the payments are going to last. We also know that it's a simple annuity, or in this case, a simple perpetuity, because compounding is monthly and the payments are monthly. And we're assuming it's an ordinary annuity because we're not told when the payments are made. And so we've assumed the end of the period, although sometimes that doesn't really work out. But in this case, in the textbook, they've assumed it's an ordinary annuity, not an annuity due. So the formula here is incredibly simple. The present value, in other words, what this perpetuity is worth, is just the payment divided by the rate of interest. We've also turned this inside out a couple of ways, but in this case, we're solving for the present value. And if you plug this into your calculator, the payment is 32. The interest rate is 4% divided by 12. And so when we calculate the present value of this, we get 9,600. So it's an easy calculation to do. If, however, we wanted to make it difficult, we could do it on the BA2 plus. So we've decided it's not annuity due. So we want to make sure we're not looking at BGN. It's monthly. So we're going to go PY equals 12, and the calculator will automatically make CY equals 12. Now we don't know N. So I've just picked a large number. I think in the textbook, they suggest putting in 3,000, but I put in 10,000. We know the rate. We're looking for the present value. We know the payment, and I make it positive because this is money we're getting, not money we're spending. And the future value, the BA2 plus needs to think future value is 0 because it's not really designed to calculate perpetuities. So we have to put 0 in here, even though we know there's no future value really to this thing. And we compute the present value, and amazingly enough, we get 96,000. So this is a negative number because we're putting this money into the investment. This is how much we're willing to pay extra to buy a hybrid. So we could also do this in Excel, still using the present value function. And we have to calculate I. So the 4% divided by 12. Again, we've just picked a large number for the number of periods. The payment we know is 32. Again, Excel needs to think that future value is 0. And we've decided it's an ordinary annuity, so we put 0 in here. And amazingly enough, it also comes up with 9,600. Although we can do these in the BA2 Plus and Excel, these formulas are incredibly easy, and you'll probably find them much easier just to do by hand. So any questions on how that worked? Someone has said, how do we know that we have to put in 10,000? And that's a very good question. You could put in any large number, but what you'll find is that if you put in a number that's not really large enough, you won't get close to your answer. Let's play with this 10,000 here. Let's say that we put in 1,000. Let's see what would happen. Notice I'm not quite getting up to 9,600, and I don't really know what number I need to get to, but if you play with it, let's put in 2,000. We can see we're getting a little bit larger. 3,000, we're getting a little bit larger. 4,000, we're getting almost to where we want to go. But in this case, we're pretending we don't know where we want to go. But we can see that it keeps going up. 5,000, okay, we're at 96, and 6,000, 7,000, but we can see it's not getting any larger. So basically, at this point, we could have settled on 5,000 and it was large enough. But anything below 5,000, we found, so so when you're trying to analyze how large of a number you need, you basically have to play with it a little. And it's easier to play with it on Excel because on Excel, we don't have to plug the whole thing in. Of course, here we could use other numbers as well, but it won't change my number here because I'm not doing it on the BA2 plus. So does that help you understand that that 10,000 is just a guess? You're just playing with numbers until you find a number that's large enough that your answer doesn't keep changing every time you put in a new number. But yeah, that's a very good question. How do you know how large a number to use? So, any other questions about how that worked before we look at the next one?
Hi, Mr. Brown. On solving it by hand, the present value shows positive, right? But through the Excel and BA2 plus, the present value is showing negative.
On the BA2 plus and Excel, both
Just
of
want to
those,
I just want to clarify on that because
yeah,
sometimes it confuses me. Okay.
yeah, because both of those are based on that cash flow concept, right? It's not really a negative number, just the negative sign there indicates that this is money we have to spend. Does that make
Okay.
sense? It's not a negative number. It's only negative in relation to your pocket. You have to spend the 9,600 in order to save the $32 per month. So the cash flow concept puts a negative sign there to indicate that that's money going out.
But on our final answers on Moodle, we don't normally put the negative sign, right?
No, because it's not a negative number. It
Okay.
is $9,600.
Okay. So it's a positive value.
Yeah, it's just the cash flow concept uses the negative sign to indicate that that's money you have to spend.
Okay, I get it now. Thank you.
Okay, and it can be confusing.
Okay, thank you.
If we do on BA2 plus, then how do we analyze the highest value? Let me go over to the BA2 plus on my screen and we can show that. Let me stop sharing this. Go and find that BA2. I don't have it anywhere. Let's go back. Let's find it here. Screen share. Now I'm hoping you can see the BA2 plus. Am I correct? Anybody
Yes.
not able to see it? Okay, so now let's go through what we need to do here. Let's clear all this. BGN is not up here, so that's good. So I'm going to go second, PY, it's monthly, 12, enter, and hit clear a couple times. So it's a simple annuity. They've put 12 into compounding per year. And now I can put some values in. I'm going to start with, let's start with 3,000 like we did on the Excel. 3,000 into N, 4 into IY, PV we don't know, 32 into payment, 0 into future value, and I can compute PV. So we get a number, but we don't know whether that's a good number or not because we haven't done any experimenting. So I've got everything else plugged in there. I'll just go and try 4,000 into N and compute PV again. And we get a number, but it changed. So as long as this number is changing, we know we have to try a higher number for N. So try 5,000 into N and compute PV. And this would round up to being 9,600. So we're probably good to go here because I don't have my calculator set to 2 decimals. Let's try that. Let's go second, format, 2, enter, clear, and then compute PV again. So we're at 6,000 now, and we want to make sure it doesn't go up any further. Let's try 6,000 into N and compute PV, and it doesn't change any. So once you've got everything plugged in, the only thing you have to change is N to see if it keeps changing or not. Does that help to see how to do it, to experiment
Yes, sir.
on the BA2 plus?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Mr. Brown, I have a question.
yes.
So it's better to change the decimal into 2 only?
Well, I wanted to change it to 2 because of course, I'm only worried about the 2 decimals here. I don't know whether if we left it at, let's see, second, format, 9, enter, clear. I don't know how much it would change depending on how many decimals we're going to. Let's try compute PV. So here we're at 99998. And that was, I think, at about 6,000. Let's try 7,000 into N, compute PV. Now we're at 99999. And let's try 8,000 into N, compute PV. So it goes all the way up to 8,000 before, and the BA2 plus works to 11 decimal places in the background. So this means that as far as 11 decimal places go, this thing would round to 9,600. So it doesn't really matter. You could keep it at 9 decimals and just keep going up until it settles on a number. So 10,000 into N. So when we're working to 11 decimals, we had to go all the way up to 8,000 before it settled on a number and we could say, yes, that's definitely the answer. So you don't have to go to 2 decimals. I just figured that would be easier.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, let's go back to our Excel file and take a look at the next one. So I'm assuming we can all see the screen. How much can be paid in scholarships at the end of each year if 150,000 is deposited in a trust fund and interest is 4.5% compounded annually? So again, we know it's a perpetuity because there's no time period given. They don't say the word perpetuity, but we have to somehow guess. Um, it's a simple annuity because compounding is annual and payments are annual. It's an ordinary annuity because we're not told when the payments are, and we're assuming the end of period. It's a little bit annoying that they don't tell us. Oh, no, sorry. They do tell us. That's a mistake on my part. Scholarships are at the end of the year. So that shouldn't say we are not told. We are told. So we know it's an ordinary annuity. We don't have to guess. So we look at the formula and they've given us the interest rate and the present value in this case. And they're asking us about the payment. So we're looking at this version of the formula over here. The payment equals the present value times the interest rate, which makes perfect sense. If the 150,000 is sitting in a bank, it makes a certain amount of interest every year, and they can shell that out as a payment or a scholarship. So this formula, we just multiply the 150,000 by the 4.5%, and we get 6,750. So probably the easiest way to do it is with the formula, but we can also use the BA2 plus. Now, this was a bit weird because for some unknown reason to me, when I tried to use 10,000, it didn't work here. So I had to use a smaller number. I would have thought you couldn't have a number that was too big. But in this case, I don't know quite what's going on inside the BA2 plus, but 10,000 didn't work. I had to lower the number until I could see that I was getting something that worked. And we can also do it on Excel. So on Excel, for some reason, the 10,000 worked perfectly. So I don't really know why it worked in this calculation. So I don't know what's going on inside the BA2 plus that made it even trickier, because here I could just put in the 10,000 and it worked fine. Let's see what would happen if we had the 3,000 here. We're still getting exactly the same answer. 1,000. We're still getting the same answer. Let's try 500. Same answer. 100. And then it changes a bit. So 6, 8. What do we get? 200. 300. 400. And at 400, if we keep changing this, we notice it doesn't change anymore. So we're pretty well sure this is our answer. I always start with 10,000 and then work from there if I need to make any changes. So I don't know why the 10,000 didn't work on the BA2 plus. So any questions on how that worked? And again, you can see the easiest thing to do, because these are very simple formulas, is to use the hand calculation. Let's try the next one. So we've got something called the Wombat Company. The Wombat Company pays a dividend of $4.25 every 3 months per preferred share. What is the expected market price per share if money is worth 8% compounded semi-annually? So this is a perpetuity only because this dividend goes on forever as long as you own the share. This is a general annuity because we're told the compounding is semi-annual, but the payments are quarterly. And we're deciding it's an ordinary annuity. I've said because we're not told when the payments are, and we're assuming they're at the end of the period, which in the case of a dividend does make sense. So we're now dealing with an ordinary general annuity, or in this case, a general perpetuity. So these equations are exactly the same, but notice we've replaced I with P. So we're going to have to calculate P. So I equals this, C equals this, P equals this, and I'm going to store this in my calculator, of course. So when we calculate, we're looking for the present value, but we're using P instead of I, and we get $214.60. But the tricky part here is we had to calculate for the letter P. Let's take a look at the BA2 plus. With the BA2 plus, we don't have to calculate P, because if we set payments to quarterly and compounding to semi-annual, somewhere inside the calculator, it calculates P for us. We never even have to think about it. Again, I started with 10,000. We have to put in the 8. So this is the nominal rate. I should put not P here. We don't have to put P here. That would make more sense. We just put the nominal rate of 8%. Is that what it was? Yeah. We're looking for the present value. We know the payment. And again, the calculator has to think future value is 0. And we compute some kind of a value, and it rounds off to 214.60 again. Now, I experimented a little. We could have used 3,000 and it would still have worked, but I always start with 10,000 just as a basic place to start with perpetuities. And we could look at the present value using Excel. In this case, we had to calculate P. So we had to calculate this value and put it in here. I started with 10,000. We have a payment of 425, the future value of 0, and it's an ordinary annuity. But we could play with this. Let's try 3,000. What do we get? Same thing. Let's try 1,000. Does it change any? No. Let's try 100. And yes, at 100, it's not big enough. So if we'd started with 100 and then tried 200, we can see that it's changing. So we would keep going. 300, and it's still changing. 400, still changed. 500, still changed. Oops. 600, it's still changed. So we'd go to 700, And now we can see it's not changing at all at 2 decimals. If we were going to more decimals, it might be changing, but 700 was large enough. But I usually go for 10,000 and it's usually big enough. So any questions on how that worked? And I recommend you start with 10,000. It just makes things a bit easier. But you can start with a lower number and work up if you want. Let's take a look at the next one. So preferred shares of Western Oil paying a quarterly dividend are to be offered at 55.60 per share. If money is worth 6.2% compounded semi-annually, what is the minimum quarterly dividend needed to make investment in such share economically feasible? So it's a perpetuity. I say because there's no period given, but logically, dividends are perpetuities. As long as you own the share, you get the dividend. So logically, it makes sense that a share and a dividend is treated as a perpetuity. It's a general annuity because we're told it's compounded semi-annually, but these are quarterly payments. So we know it's a general annuity, meaning we know we're going to have to calculate P. And it's an ordinary annuity. And with shares, it makes sense that they're ordinary because you get the payment at the end of the time period. So because it's an ordinary general annuity, or in this case, I've called it a perpetuity, we have the same 3 formulas, but we've replaced I with P, and we have to calculate P. So we come up with this ridiculous number, and we store it in our calculator. And then the present value is the cost of the share. So we take the cost of the share multiplied by the rate, and we find that the dividend should be 86 cents per share. So we're using this formula here to find the dividend. And we can use the BA2 plus. Because it's a general annuity, we have to set PY and CY separately. We don't have to calculate P. I should put the nominal rate here, not I, but it's not P that you're putting in here. And this is the amount we spend. I'm going to guess 10,000. And we end up again with the 86 cents. We can do it on Excel. And now it'll be easier to guess or to try a few other numbers. If we'd started with, say, 100, we'd start finding out a number, but we wouldn't know whether that number is going to stay or not. Let's try 200, and that number changes. So we want to keep going up. 300, and it's changed again. So go up to 400, and it's not going anywhere now. So although I automatically go for 10,000, 10,000 is probably incredible overkill because that number sort of became stationary at 400. So any thoughts or concerns there? So let's see what else they can do to us. So Larry and John purchased a warehouse property for $836,000 that they're going to lease to several businesses, including a computer repair business. I have no clue why we needed to know that. The property provides a net income of $3,600, and they're very clear here at the beginning of every month. What is the monthly compounded annual yield earned by the property? So we're assuming it's a perpetuity because as long as they own the property, they can charge the rent. It's a simple annuity because why do we know? Oh, it's a simple annuity because the payments are at the beginning of every month, and we're being told or asked for the monthly compounded annual yield. So we're being asked to find the monthly rate. And this is annuity due because payments are at the beginning of the month. So we have another set of formulas here for a simple perpetuity due or a simple annuity due, same thing. So now the payment plus the payment divided by I. Notice this is the extra payment at the beginning. And for calculating I, it's payment divided by present value minus payment. Or if we have to calculate for the payment, it's the present value divided by 1 plus 1 over I. So the formulas get a little bit more tricky. So we're finding I, so we're using this middle one. So we need to know the present value, the payment, and we calculate I as being equal to this weird number here. We have to figure out what this weird number means. So I multiplied it by 100 to get a percentage, and I multiplied it by 12 to get the annual rate. So it turned out to be 5.1898% compounded monthly. So that made it a little bit more difficult because the formula didn't really give us the answer we wanted. We had to do a bit of weird work to get it. Let's take a look at using the BA2 plus for the same situation. Payments are monthly. Compounding will also be set to monthly. I started with 10,000. We don't know the interest rate. We do know the present value, the cost of the building, and that has to be negative because that's money we had to spend. We know the monthly income, the rent is 3,600, and this is positive, it's money we're getting. And the calculator has to think future value is 0. And we compute for the interest rate. But notice in this case, the BA2 plus was a better choice because it gives us the exact answer we want without having to translate this into something we can understand. So in this case, the BA2 plus is probably the better way to go. We could also do this on Excel. But the number of periods, for some reason I've got 377, which I don't know why I've got 377 there. It's a ridiculous number. I guess I was playing with it. Oh, I think I was playing with it because I couldn't get Excel to give me a reasonable answer. If I put 10,000 here, it doesn't work. If I put 500 here, it doesn't work. But 100, it works, but gives me a weird answer that I can't understand. 200 gives me a weird answer. 300, again, none of these answers are making any sense to me. And the highest answer, the highest number I could put here was 377, but it still didn't make any sense. So I concluded that for some reason in this question, I couldn't use Excel because Excel isn't making any sense. Whereas the BA2 Plus gave us a perfectly good answer. And doing it by hand gave us a good answer, but we had to do some work to get there. So if you can figure out why it did not work in Excel, you could let me know. But I couldn't make it make any sense whatsoever there. Don't know why this is in percentage. Shouldn't be, should just be a number. But so in that case, using Excel was a total failure. But the BA2 Plus worked quite well in that case. So if there's any questions other than why it didn't work in Excel, okay, let's try the next one. So Barbara Katzman bought income property for $280,000 3 years ago. She has held the property for 3 years without renting it. So we don't know why she did that. If she rents the property out now, what should be the size of the monthly rent payment due in advance if money is worth 6% compounded monthly? So this is a perpetuity because as long as she owns the property, she can rent it out. So although they give us a time period of 3 years, that's not the time period we're worried about. It's a simple annuity. Let's see, compounding is 6% monthly, and she's renting it out and charging monthly rent. So it's a simple annuity. It's an annuity due because people pay the rent at the beginning of the month, which makes perfect sense. And it's a deferred annuity. She strangely waited 3 years. So whenever we're looking at a deferred annuity, I always find it helpful to try and make some sort of a diagram to understand what's going on. So my diagram didn't really work all that well because it's hard to draw a picture of infinity, but this is what I came up with. She pays the amount, and that amount, if we compound it for 3 years, the amount goes up, which means she wants to recover more than the original amount. She wants it to cover this amount here because she's waited for 3 years, which is a little weird. I don't know why people have to pay for her mistake of waiting 3 years, but she would like them to. And she's going to get payments for now as long as she owns and rents out the property. So this is sort of what we're looking at. So before we can deal with the perpetuity, we just have to find the future value of the property. So after 3 years, in her head, this property is now worth 335,000. Because if she just put the money in the bank at 6% interest, she'd now have $335,000. So that's what she thinks the property should generate revenue to cover. So this is just a simple calculation of calculating the future value. It's a compound interest calculation, but not an annuity. So now we have to deal with the annuity. It's a simple perpetuity due. So we have these formulas again. And we're looking for the payment. So we're dealing with this first one here. We know the present value. Oh, sorry, we're looking for this one over here. We're looking for the payment. We know the present value. We know the value of I. And if we plug it in here and calculate it, we come up with $1,667.02. So hopefully, if you plug it in and calculate it, you'll also come up with the same answer. If not, you'll let me know. So we're using the BA2 plus. In this case, because it's an annuity due, we have to make sure we see the little letters BGN. So to get them, go second, BGN, second, and set. If they're not there. The first calculation is not a annuity. We're just calculating to find the future value of 280,000 at 6% for 36 months. And we compute the future value and we get the same 335,000 that we got up here. So now we're going to calculate the annuity section. So now the BGN matters because there's payments. So we set the payments to monthly. I'm going to start with 10,000. Interest is 6%. We know the present value. It's this number we generated up here, but now it's got to be negative. We don't know the payment, and we tell the calculator future value is 0. Or we don't know. Yes. And we calculate the payment, and amazingly enough, we come up with exactly the same answer as our hand calculation. So we could also do this on Excel. Again, the first calculation we have to do is just finding the future value. We have to put I in here, 36 months, no payments here. The 280,000 is negative because she had to pay this for the building. And it's an annuity due, so the type has to be 1. Once we come up with this, again, 335,000, we can calculate for the payment. And again, this is where we have to come up with this 10,000. But we could play with it. Let's say we started with 100. We get a number. We have no clue whether that number is a good number or not until we try 200 and we see it changes. If it changes, keep going up. 300 keeps changing. 400 keeps changing. 500 keeps changing. 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000, and it keeps changing. So as long as it changes, we know we haven't found a big enough number yet. 11,000, 12,000, oops, 13,000, 14, 15, 16, 17, and we're still changing. Let's jump up to 2,000, see if that's high enough. Still not high enough. 2,500. So let's try 3,000. And it stayed the same. So at 2,500, we were good. Let's go down a bit, 2,400. Nope, that's not quite high enough. So 2,500. And from there on, we can see it doesn't change any. So I usually start with 10,000 anyway, but you can sort of build up to it to see when you've got a big enough number. And in that case, Excel worked, the BA2 Plus worked, and the hand calculation will always work. So I don't know why. In one of the cases we've used in question 4, we couldn't get the BA2 Plus to give us a good answer. And in question 5, we couldn't get Excel to give us a good answer. But in every case, the hand calculation will give you a good answer. So let's take a look at another concept. So this is called a constant growth perpetuity. So it says, what would you be willing to pay for a preferred share of stock that promises to pay you a cash dividend of $25 at the end of each year, which will increase by 1% forever? So the 25 will change every year. It'll go up. I have no idea if such preferred shares exist, but they want us to calculate them anyway. So the interest rate is fixed at 4.75% compounded annually. So we know it's a perpetuity because the payments go on forever. We know it's a simple perpetuity or simple annuity because compounding is annual and payments are annual. It's an ordinary annuity because payments are at the end of the year, which makes sense for stock. And it's not a deferred annuity, no mention of a waiting period. And so we have a formula for a constant growth perpetuity. The payment divided by I minus K. We know what the payment is. We know what I is, it's the interest rate, but K is the growth rate of the annuity payments. And we've been told they're 1%. And if we plug these numbers in, we find out we'd be willing to pay $666.67 for this preferred stock. And unfortunately, I've never figured out or seen how to do constant growth perpetuities on the BA2 plus or using Excel. So if you can figure out how to calculate these on Excel, I would love to know, but I've never seen it and I have never been able to figure it out. The formula is fairly simple, and if you try it, I'm hoping you'll be able to make it work. So,
Could you do it by
shall we
using
do it?
hand?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Present value equals payment over I minus K. And our payment here is 25 and 4.75% and 1%. Okay, so now let's go over to a whiteboard. And what do we have? So I'm trusting you can see the whiteboard. Or I'm trusting you'll let me know if you can't see it. So the present value equals payment over I minus K, which is 25 over I, which is 4.75% minus 1%. So that's actually 25 over 0.0475 minus 0.01. Am I missing a 0? 1%. No, 0.01. So this becomes 25 over, let's see, 4.75% minus 1% equals 0.047025. Let's see if that works. I'll store that in 1. 25 divided by, we call 1. And that didn't work. That gave me 531. So what did I do wrong here? 4.75%. We'll store that. And 1%. Store that. Recall 1 minus recall 2. Oh, this number here is ridiculous. I don't know what happened. This became 0.0375. So now let's try that. 25 divided by 0.375 equals 666.6 repeating, which would round off to 666.67. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. So how do we analyze the value of K?
What they've told us is K equals the, how did they phrase it? Let's see if we can find that. Oh, that didn't work. No. Trying to get this other screen back. K is the constant growth rate of the annuity payments. So they've told us they'll increase by 1% every year.
Okay, sir.
So not sure what happened here. Get rid of that. So if they've told us that K is the growth rate of our payment. So what you're basically doing is you're having 25 divided by 4.75% for 1 year, but then this is increasing by 25% or by 1%. So 1% times 25 is 25 cents. So the next year, this is 25.25 divided by 4.75%. And the next year, that would be times 1% plus 25.25. So this thing keeps going up by 1% every year. So the next year would be 25.5025 over 4.75%. And this goes on forever. So finding the present value of this income stream, this is the formula that you do it, 1 minus K. So let's save that and clear that and stop sharing that whiteboard and go back to sharing the Excel file. So here we had a constant growth perpetuity where the payment would increase every year. The last one they give us is still a constant growth perpetuity, but annoyingly enough, it's negative growth. The purchase of preferred shares in a new software company guarantees a cash dividend of $32 per share at the end of its first year. However, the dividend is expected to decrease by 0.5% per year as the company reinvests its earnings. What is the expected market price per share if money is worth 5.25% compounded annually? So it's a perpetuity because the dividends go on as long as you own the shares. It's a simple annuity because compounding is annual and payments are annual. It's an ordinary annuity. We're not actually told beginning or end, but shares, you get the payments at the end of we are told end of its first year. So let's get rid of that. We are told and it's not a deferred annuity because there's no mention of a waiting period. So this is referred to as a constant growth perpetuity because the payments, in this case, decrease, every year. In this case, it is a constant negative growth perpetuity, which seems like doublespeak, negative growth, but that's what they're doing. But we're still going to use exactly the same formula. The payment divided by I minus K, and we should get, if we plug it in, 556.52. And again, I haven't figured out how to do it on the BA2 Plus or Excel. So let's take these numbers that we're given and go over to the whiteboard and see if it works again. 32, 5.25%, and negative 0.5%. So let's see if we can make that work. So what do we know? We know our formula here is the present value, which is what we're willing to pay for the share, is equal to the payment divided by I minus K. And I equals 5.25%, which is 0.0525, and K equals negative 0.5%. Let's find out what that's equal to. 0.5% is negative 0.005. So if we plug these in up here, or we knew the payment was 32. So we plug 32 in to 0.0525 minus negative 0.005. So let's see if we can make sense out of what happened down there. It's really a negative minus a negative is going to be positive. So this is going to be 0.0525 plus the 0.005. I'm getting this is going to equal 0.0575. And let's see if we get any kind of a reasonable answer. 32 divided by 0.0575. And I'm getting 556.52. And I can't remember if that's the answer we had originally or not. Yes, it is. So that's good. So does that make sense? If it's a negative growth perpetuity, you're doing a negative minus a negative, which is really a plus. So let's save that.
Hello, Mr. Brown.
Yes.
I just have a question on the last question number 8.
Yeah,
Is interest rate per conversion period, wherein I is equal to interest rate per conversion period, the same as interest rate per compounding period?
yes,
So it's the same because I here was divided by 1.
yes, because it was annual. If it
Oh,
had
okay.
been a semi-annual rate, we'd have divided it by 2.
So conversion period is the same as the term compounding period.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
although I see I've spelt the word conversion wrong. I've written converon. I don't know what converon is.
Okay.
So that's all I can inflict on you for today. So I'll see you again next week before we have a test. But at the end of next week, you have a test on chapter 5 and on compound interest 7, 8, and 9. So that's up to the end of chapter 13. We spent about 5 weeks looking at chapter 13. I can't believe they put that much stuff in one chapter, but we'll be finishing it. We finished it today. That's this perpetuity is the end of chapter 13. So any questions you can think of asking before I wish you good luck? This chapter will be included in the syllabus of midterm 3. Yes, this, not chapter 6, but compound interest 9, which is perpetuities, will be in on the test. So perpetuities that we just covered, which is compound interest 9, that's on the midterm number 3. The date of the test. Okay, let's look on the calendar. It's July. Now we're at July 29th now. So this week is Friday the 2nd. Week 10, it's Friday, July 9. Friday, July the 9th will be midterm number 3. Let's put that. Any other questions, comments, suggestions, rude or otherwise? Cries of agony, moans of despair? Okay, in that case, thank you very much for letting me bore you to death for close to 3 hours. And I hope your studies go well. And I'll hear from you anytime you have questions. Send me an email and I will try to answer them. Thank you. Have a good day.
Sir,
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Thank you, sir.
sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Bye now. I'm recording this, so I will post this recording and hopefully I'll remember to send you these snapshots as well. Thank you.